Um,
Number 16.
mhm. A number of years ago, I spent in Turkey with Rachel Carson. Her book, Silent Spring, had just appeared. Silent indifferent in America to its Belgian weather, arising for the first time the silent concept. The man was not likely to inhabit this store very long after its rival had disappeared. That the destiny of man and animal was closely interrelated was a new notion, and not a very comforting one. And Miss Carson had found herself attacked by those who were not at all with carrying wide or harm animal. At one point during the conversation, she made a shy confession. At her marine laboratory near Birthday Harbor, Maine, she said she daily removed small quantities of seawater from the tidal flow and made a microscopic examination of behavior of a tiny creature she had captured. But then, she had almost apologetically. She had returned the sample to the sea. This suggests a respect for life that bordered on violence from her. I cannot help but remark the feeling of return of from water to the sea, but not the right balance of nature. Miss Carson then looked genuinely embarrassed. If that surprises you, she said, I hesitate to say what I am going to tell next. If those little creatures are going to survive, I must return them to sea at the same tide level from which I took them. That means, that often, I must set my alarm clock, put on my rubber slippers, and carry a sample back to sea by flashlight. It's not always a pleasant work, especially on rainy nights. やっぱ女の人の方が聞き取りやすい。なぜか。A number of years ago, I spent on the afternoon talking with Rachel Carson. Her book, Silent Spring, had just appeared. Criticizing indifference of America towards its vanishing value and raising for the first time a certain concept, the man was not likely to inhabit this term very long after its value had disappeared. That the destiny of man and animal was closely interrelated was a new notion, and not very comforting one. And Miss Carson had found herself attacked by those who saw nothing wrong with killing wild or harmful animals. At one point during our conversation, she made a shy confession. At her marine laboratory near Bay Harbor, Maine, she said she daily removed small quantities of seawater from the tidal flow and made microscopic examination of behavior of a tiny creature she had captured. But then, she had learned most apologetically. She had returned the sample of the sea. This suggests a respect for life that bordered on narcissism, and I couldn't help but remark that failing to the spoonful of water to the sea was not likely to upset the balance of nature. Miss Kirsten then looked genuinely embarrassed. If that surprises you, she said, I hesitate to say what I am going to tell you next. If those little creatures are going to survive, I must return them to the sea at the same tide level from which I took them. That means that often I must set my alarm clock, put on my rubber slippers, and carry the sample back to sea by flashlight. It's not always a pleasant walk, especially on rainy nights. A number of years ago, I spent an afternoon talking with Rachel Carson. Her book, Silent Spring, had just appeared, criticizing the indifference of America toward its vanishing battle and raising for the first time the silent concept The man was not likely to inhabit this star very long after its world had disappeared. That the destiny of man and animal was closely interrelated was a new notion, and a not very comforting one. And Miss Carson had found herself attacked by those so not alone with carrying white or harmful animals. At one point during our conversation, she made a shy confession. At her marine laboratory near Busby Harbor, Maine, she said she daily removed small quantities of seawater from the tideways and made microscopic examination of the behavior of the tiny creatures she had captured. But then, she added almost apologetically, she had returned the sample to the sea. This suggests a respect for life, the border on fanaticism was not likely to upset the balance of nature. Miss Carson then recalled genially embarrassed. If that surprises you, she said, I hesitate to say what I'm going to tell you next. Is the rare creature going to survive? I must return them to sea at the same tide level from which I took them. That means that often I must set my alarm clock, put on my glove and slippers, and carry the sample back to the sea by flashlight. It's not always a pleasant walk, especially on rainy nights. A number of years ago, I spent an afternoon talking with Rachel Carson. Her book, Silent Spring, had just appeared, criticizing the indifference of America toward its vanishing wildlife and raising for the first time the starring concept. The man was not likely to inhabit this state star very long as the wildlife had disappeared. That destiny of man and animal was closely interrelated. That's a new notion, and not a very comforting one. And Miss Gilson had found herself attacked by those who was nothing wrong with carrying wild or harmful animals. At one point during our conversation, she made a shy confession. At her marine laboratory near Bruce Bay Harbor, Maine, she said she daily removed small quantities of seawater from tidal and made microscopic examination of behavior of the tiny creature she had captured. But then, she had almost apologetically, she would return the sample to the sea. This suggests a respect for life. The border of narcissism. I couldn't help but remark that failing to return the sample of water to the sea was not likely to upset the balance of nature. Miss Carson then looked genuinely embarrassed. "Is that surprise you?" she said. "I hesitate to say what I am going to tell you next. If the little creatures are going to survive, I must return them to sea at the same chair level from which I took them. That means that often I must set my alarm clock, put on my rubber and zippers, and carry the sample back to the sea by flashlight. It's not always a pleasant walk, especially on rainy nights." A number of years ago, I spent an afternoon taken with Rachel Carson. Her work, Silent Spring, had just appeared, criticized the indifference of America toward its vanishing wildlife and raising for the first time the starting concept. The man was not likely to inhabit this term very long after its wildlife had disappeared. There is the star, the starting concept. Man was not likely to inhabit this star very long after its wildlife disappeared. That is the The starting concept. The man was not likely to inherit this throne very long after his wildlife had disappeared. That the destiny of man and animal was closely interrelated was a new notion, and not a very comforting one. And Miss Carson had found herself attacked by those folks of nothing wrong with carrying wild or harmful animal. At one point during our conversation, she made a shy confession. "At her marine laboratory near Busby Harbor, Maine," she said. She daily removed small quantity of seawater from the tide pool and made a microscopic examination of the behavior of the tiny creature she had captured. But then, she added almost apologetically, she would return the sample to the sea. This suggests respect for life, the border on classism, and I couldn't help but remark that failing to return spoonful of water to the sea was not likely to upset the balance of nature. Miss Carson then looked genuinely embarrassed. "If that surprises you," she said, "I hesitate to say what I'm going to tell next. If the little creatures are going to survive, I must return them to sea at the same tide level from which I took them. That means thereafter I must set my alarm clock, put on my robe and slippers, and carry the sample back to the sea by flashlight. It's not always a pleasant walk, especially on rainy nights." A number of years ago, I spent an afternoon talking with Rachel Carson. Her book, Science Spring, had just appeared, criticizing the indifference of America toward its vanishing bedrock and raising, for the first time, the strong concept. The man was not likely to inhabit this shore very long. After his wildlife wildlife had disappeared. Wildlife had disappeared. The man was not likely to inhabit this shore very long. After its wildlife had disappeared. That the listing of man and animal has records interrelated was a new notion, and not a very comforting one. And Miss Carson had found herself attacked by those who saw nothing wrong with killing wild or harmful animals. At one point during our conversation, she made a shy confession. "I've had marine liberty near Brisbane have a Maine," she said. She daily removed small quantities of seawater from tidal pools. From the tidal pools have a Maine, she said. She daily removed small quantities of seawater from tidal pools and made microscopic examination of the behavior of the tiny creatures she had captured. But then, she added almost apologetically, she would return the sample to the sea. This suggests a respect for life, the border on classism, and I couldn't help but remark the feeling to return a sparkle of water to the sea was not likely to upset the plans of nature. Miss Carson then looked genuinely embarrassed. "If that surprises you," she said, "I hesitate to say what I am going to tell next. If those little creatures are going to survive, I must return them to the sea at the same tide level from which I took them. That means that often I must set my alarm clock, put on my robe and slippers, and carry the sample back to the sea by flashlight. It's not always a pleasant walk, especially on rainy nights." Ah. A number of years ago, I spent one afternoon talking with Rachel Carson. Her book, Silent Spring, had just appeared, criticizing the indifference of America toward its vanishing wildlife and raising for the first time the startling concept that man was not likely to inhabit this earth very long after its wildlife had disappeared. That the destiny of man and animal was closely interrelated was a new notion, and not a very comforting one. And Miss Carson had found herself attacked by the so oh my god. His wildlife disappears. That the destiny closely interrelated was a new notion, and not very comforting one. And Miss Carson had found herself attacked by those who saw nothing wrong with killing wild or harmful animals. At one point during our conversation, she made a shy confession. "At Herman Liberty in Brisbane Harbor, Malcolm seawater." But then she added almost apologetically, she would return the sample to the sea. This suggests a respect for life, self-tolerance, narcissism, and I couldn't help but remark, fearing to return spread for our order to see was not likely to upset the balance of nature. Miss Carson then looked genuinely embarrassed. "It does surprise you," she said. "I hesitate to say whether I'm going to do next. Is the little creature going to survive? I must return them to sea at the same child level from which I took them. Tell me that often I must set my alarm clock, put on robe and slippers, and carry the sample back to the sea by flashlight. It is not always a prison walk, especially on rainy nights." And nearly years ago, I spent an afternoon talking with Rachel Carson. Her book, Silent Spring, had just appeared, criticizing indifference of America towards its expansion wildlife and raising for the first time the starting concept. The man was not likely to inhabit this star very long after its wildlife had disappeared. That the destiny of man and animal was closely interrelated was a new notion and a not very comforting one. Our misconception have found herself attacked by those nothing wrong, and not very comforting one. The misconception have found herself attacked by those saw nothing wrong with killing wild or harmful animals. Not very comforting one. A misconception have found herself attacked by those who saw nothing wrong, killing wild or harmful animals. And Miss Carson had found herself attacked by those who saw nothing wrong with killing conflict one. And Miss Carson found herself attacked by those who saw nothing wrong with killing wild or harmful animals. At one point during our conversation, she made a shy confession. At her marine laboratory near Bay Harbor, Maine, she said she daily removed some quantity of seawater from the tidal pools and made a microscopic examination of the behavior of tiny creatures. Her laboratory near Bay Harbor, Maine, she said she daily removed small quantities of seawater from the tidal pools and made a microscopic examination of the behavior of tiny creatures she had captured. But then she added the natural behavior of the tiny. But then she added almost apologetically, she will return the sample to the sea. This suggested a respect for life, the border of narcissism, and I couldn't help but remark that failing to return spectral water to the sea was not likely to upset the balance of nature. Miss Carson then looked genuinely embarrassed. "If that surprises you," she said, "I hesitate to say what I am going to say next. If those little creatures are going to survive, I must return them to the sea at the same tide level from which I took them. That means that often I must set my alarm clock, put my robe, put Miss Carson then looked genuinely embarrassed. "If that surprises you," she said, "I hesitate to say what I am going to tell you next. If those little creatures are going to survive, I must return them to the sea at the same child level from which I took them. That means that often I must set my alarm clock, put on my robe and slippers, and carry a sample back to the sea by flashlight. It's not only always a pleasant walk, especially on rainy nights." And never years ago, I spent the next afternoon talking with Rachel Carson. Her book, Silent Springs, had just appeared, criticizing the indifference of America towards its vanishing wildlife and raising, for the first time, the starting concept. The man was not likely to inherit the throne very long after his wildlife disappeared. The death destiny of animal was closely interrelated, but the new Russian, and not very comforting one. A Miss Curson had found herself attacked by those who felt nothing wrong with carrying the rat. Uh, at one point during this conversation, she really shy. She dared him to move small quantity of seawater from childbirth and make microscopic examination of the behavior of the tiny creatures she had captured. But then, she added on apologetically, she will return the sample to the sea. This suggested the respect for life, borrowed narcissism, and I couldn't help but remark the feeling tiny to spell for a moment was not likely to upset balance of nature. Miss Jackson looked genuinely embarrassed. If that surprises you, say, I hasten to say what I'm going to tell you next. If those little creatures are going to survive, I must return to sea at the same child level which I took them. That means that often I must set my alarm clock, put on my robe and slippers, and carry the sample threshold. It's not always a pleasant walk. むずい。ガチシャドーイングむずい。That's why he disappeared. The death is a manual animal. This crossing interrelated, because in your Russian has not very comforting one. Always custom have the sort tucked, those you attack no, getting right on harmful animals. At one point during this conversation, she made a shy confession. At Harvard Laboratory, the newer Harvard Maine, she said she did remove small quantity of seawater from tide pools and made microscopic examination of behavior of tiny creatures she had captured. Then she added on apologically. This suggested it's ethical life, water on last season. I couldn't have remarked the feeling silence the smell for water of the sea. ひどいな。A number of years ago, I spent an afternoon talking with Rachel Carson. Her book, Silent Spring, had just appeared, criticizing the indifference of America toward expansion value and raising for the first time the starring concept. The man was not likely to inhabit this term very long after its viral had disappeared. That the destiny of man and animal was closely interrelated was a new notion, and not a very comforting one. And Miss Castle had found herself attacked by those who had nothing wrong with carrying wild or harmful animals. At one point during our conversation, she made a shy confession. At her marine laboratory near Brisbane Harbour, Maine, she said she did remove a small quantity of seawater from the tidal pool and made microscopic examination of behavior of the tiny creature she had captured. But then, she added almost apologetically, she will return the sample to the sea. This suggests a respect for life, the border on narcissism. and I couldn't help but remark that failing to return of some of water to the sea was not likely to upset the balance of nature. This cousin then looked genuinely embarrassed. "It's not surprising," she said. "I hesitate to say what I am going to tell next. If the law, the creatures are going to survive, I must return them to sea at the same time level from which I took them. That means that often I must set my alarm clock, put on my robe and slippers, and carry the sample back to the sea by flashlight. It's not only a pleasant walk, especially on rainy nights." I number 16. A number of years ago, I spent an afternoon talking with Rachel Carson. Her book, Silent Spring, had just appeared, criticizing the indifference of America toward the expansion battery and raising, for the first time, a silent concept. The man was not likely to inherit this star very long after its father had disappeared. That the destiny of man and animal was closely interrelated was a new notion, and not a very comforting one. Our Miss Carson had found herself attacked by those who saw nothing wrong with killing wild or harmful animals. At one point during our conversation, she made a shy confession. As her murmured loudly in a voice with her mane, she said she daily moved small quantity of seawater from tidal flows and made microscopic examination of behavior of tiny creatures she had captured. But then, she added almost apologetically, she would return the sample to the sea. This suggests respect for life, that ballroom Nazism, and I couldn't help but remark, and felt the return spoonful of water to the sea was not likely to accept the balance of nature. Miss Carson then looked genuinely embarrassed. "If that surprises you," she said, "I hesitate to say what I am going to tell you next. If those little creatures are going to survive, I must return them to at the same child level from which I took them. That means that often I must set my alarm clock, put on robe and slippers, and carry the sample back to the sea by flashlight. It's not only always a pleasant walk, especially on rainy nights."